Niels Schrader, founding member of the design office Mind Design in Amsterdam. Amsterdam is actually not my real home. I'm living there for since 12 years. I was born in South America in Caracas. I've studied in Düsseldorf and I moved on to study in Amsterdam at the Akademie. The master is the Sandberg Institute, and since then actually I just got stuck there apparently. So slowly I started to set up my own office there, and since then actually it's also a nice city to stay with and to belong to. So the culture of graphic design is Amsterdam has its roots. The Dutch design is in fact also something that is very inspiring to be active in. So that's with respect to my background. Presently, I chose this title, in fact, to discuss today because, as for me being also the head of department at the Royal Academy in The Hague since recently, since 2003, I was always questioning myself. So, what in fact is what we're teaching our students? And we've been challenged 2 years ago, so to really define a new curriculum. And partially, one of the ideas that potentially also all the other academies have is to really implement innovation. And how is this innovation to be triggered? So this kind of thoughts are in fact that are a bit implemented in this presentation, but in the end they also show my work and how I approach, actually to how I oppose the fact of templating, how I try to really fight against what nowadays has been more and more really a template culture, something that is visible in many ways. Some examples. This is a project, form follows format, from a dear friend of mine, Graphique, who has collected a couple of templates and made a whole installation out of it. But he was actually sort of analyzing the parameters that determine our design and how we communicate. In fact, all these media, let's call them social media, sort of present a grid, a fixed grid, in which we sort of press our messages into, and that in fact results into this kind of templating. And there's fairly too little happening next to it. And this is where I think we as designers can be more and more meaningful. So we have to start with thinking or asking the question is, what is a template per se? A template, as a matter of fact, can be something that you call a style guide. It's probably gets close to what we in German would call Schnittmuster, the dress pattern of a fashion designer, where in fact you extract the basics to get into mass production. So a template is in fact a one-size-fits-all solution. If you want to continue this thought of fashion, then the aspect of prêt-à-porter, which is probably the template comes close to what the template is, versus the innovative haute couture, which is custom-made for the client. So how did it happen that templating became part of the communication? As a matter of fact, we have some development in communication where the length shortened. We are using all these media and in fact shortening what we are saying, so the content becomes less and less relevant. Just to name a couple of examples, it's a maximum of characters within text messaging, which probably is already old-fashioned, but it came into picture in the 90s. Was 160. Twitter is even less. It's 140 characters. Bitly to play here and allow deep links actually allows to translate long URLs into 20 characters, and yeah, the phenomenon of using small keyboards also has resulted in shortening words and using abbreviations. So this is just sort of like a rough indication of how we communicate. Probably like the question here is, well, if communication becomes shorter, and if we are actually communicating less content, so why should we make any effort in designing this content and structuring it? And that's, I think, the key question, because the smaller the amount of content, the less likely you're going to spend time really giving spending design on it. There is probably a familiar, I don't know, especially the economists within sitting here will know the so-called Pareto principle. 20% of input generates 80% of output. Translated into resources, then you have the sentence of 20% of resources create 80% of output. If you translate it into a graph, you get this picture where you see to achieve 80%, you only have to invest 20% of your resources, but to gain the last 20%, you have to invest 4/5 of what you had before. So in the end, this last 20%, which you could potentially consider to be like the quality aspect of design, in fact, what makes defines haute couture, that takes 80% of resources, of effort to invest in. However, the nature of templating is something that sort of shows you it's a short and rough solution. So this instant aspect of it, it is ephemeral because it doesn't have any lifespan, and in fact, by generating or like taking this 20% into the 80% that we are losing, it will by nature not fit the concept of templating anymore. So what we can conclude is in fact that diversifying templates to fulfill the desire of individuality will shrink the market of them. So that's a sort of paradox that in the end, nicely visualized here by walking in Xiamen in China, looking at all these wedding photographers who try to sort of desperately to make this photo shoot individual, but in the end, what they do is sort of templating. It is too much effort to customize the generic solution. So I would suggest, and that's actually what I'm trying to bring as a message, then you could better start from scratch. And that's actually something that, for me has always been driving effort. Well, why starting and using all these software tools that we are offered by big companies like Adobe? I'd rather suggest leave them behind and start programming. This was actually something that I also did implement in my work. So programming as a way of freeing myself from this template culture, this is something that I really can show here in this presentation. It's the very beginning for the people, especially, I don't know if the candidate who's supposed to present tomorrow is here present, but I thought like probably this is my final exam. So it is really, really long time ago. Please bear with me. It's a 4 minutes movie, but this is sort of also a bit the starting of programming for me. This movie, being one of the first generative works that I've been doing, was also for me interesting because, well, in the end, I don't know if you have realized, but it's these numbers that are displayed there. They are the color values of the pixels that, in fact, are displayed on every screen. Yeah. So what you do is, in fact, you tear apart the facade of the screen that you're looking at, and you just extract the simple values and by sort of sorting them accordingly to the grid of you get back an interesting image which gets at least close to what has been displayed in gray shades before, because the number that has 3 digits has more white value than something that has only 1. So this has been presented as a sort of digital installation, that you really walk through, and sound was included by sound artists. So it's also a nice example for the interdisciplinary approach in my work, since I consider my design also to be a hub where people of architecture, programming, and sound come together. Now recently I'm working with a 3D video designer. So this sort of people which go far beyond of what actually my own expertise is. And that's actually something that I really consider to be very, very productive and nice. So continuing the path of generative design, I was assigned in 2009 to do the annual report of the Monrad Foundation, which doesn't exist unfortunately anymore, but it was a foundation from the Dutch cultural institutions that would in fact deliver the money that it would receive from the Dutch government to specific projects. So people in institutions, cultural institutions would be able to apply here and actually pitch for the money. So what happens here is that it's an institution that sort of gives away the money according to sort of specific cultural to sort of values that they consider to be relevant, but that has not ever been promoted before. So in the history of this Monument Foundation, it was always sort of about the pie charts, which of the applicants has received most of the money. And this sort of game was sort of tiring me. So where I thought like, okay, well, I'm not going to continue and make the next annual report that just only presents again the numbers and nice pie charts, but rather tries to express what this Monument Foundation as an institution is. I will pass around the book, so you will be able to also browse through it. Actually, anybody know? Yeah, just probably I've never known that before. Grazen. So when we browse on the net, you are actually like cows who are eating grass. It's actually very interesting. So far about browsing. So this book has been produced to display what the Monument Foundation actually is, and that's sort of a network hub where people come together, people from different disciplines, and that's actually something that I try to express in these lines. And as you can see, probably in most of these images, there are thin, solid, but also dashed lines who actually connect pieces and bits of information on each spread and crisscross run through all the publication. So what's all about it? You have different pages, you have different kinds of so-called hyperlinks. You can consider them as hyperlinks because they're in fact connecting related works. Different setting of type results in different lines or constellations. So actually each page is unique, and you can imagine that this is something that you could definitely not generate without external software. So what we did and how we in fact solved it is that we hacked Adobe PDF by importing JavaScript code as a bookmark and execute it within this environment. I will come to that later, but this is sort of like where I try to really like challenge the software that's given to us to produce something that I consider to be the next step. Okay, you can see that this is a spread. This actual spread is also displayed on one of the most important spreads, the overview spread. I think it's the first or the sixth spread in the book. This is how it looks. So if you have it in your hands, then you will see. And these are actually all the pages. On the left you see the front, and on the back, on the right you see the back sides of this real folios. And what's a folio? Folio is Druckfeld in German. So you can all these pages are arranged according to how they are going to be printed on the folio. So this layout actually was not determined by me, but by production. And there's a nice actual story to tell about, but as you can see next to this red box, there's the miniature of this spread, which includes also miniatures. So now you can imagine that these texts were all still readable for the computer. So if these texts are readable, then also the text within the miniatures is also readable. And this is actually the moment where the whole system crashed, and we really had to sort of restart the computer and exclude these pages, because this is sort of the, what's it called, the Russian mamushka, like this dolls that actually inside. You just take apart, and there's the next one and the next one. So this was a bit too ambitious, but these are sort of the things that come with programming In fact, this is a sheet, this is an original sheet. Fortunately, again, this project was done together with the program because this goes far beyond the expertise. But this is also the nice thing about collaboration. It's in fact, how far can you go to sort of explore together with somebody who can really like implement it on a high technical level. And for me, it was really important to add sort of a proof of concept that you would sort of give away with every annual report, an original sheet to show that this virtual landscape, that's in fact displayed here, did exist. So there's actually lines, in fact, crossing the folio, just as it is displayed here, right? You see crisscross through all the. So in the end, for book production, you fold all the folios. You see that also here in the binding, this is full of lines. So basically, everything goes also through the binding, the spine. And this is how it was in fact produced. It was a big challenge because there were some obstacles within production, but indeed I think probably explain it at the very end. But the conceptual idea was in fact to combine or to connect items that are related. And having said that, it's actually it was interesting for me to use this annual report as something that you would not read from the beginning to the end, but by nature would browse. You would use it as a sort of website, and I think that's actually also what the nature is of annual reports. It's nothing that you just run through it and try to grasp what is interesting for yourself. So we determined what could these hyperlinks look like if you're going to use it as a sort of network, physical manifestation of a network. And we defined two kinds of links, which are editorial links. It's in fact when the author points to a specific location and saying, okay, well, this is on this page, you have to continue reading about this project. This is unidirectional, just goes from one to the other. And then you have also bidirectional links. I can tell you later. This is something that is executed with software. But okay, coming back to some examples for where these editorial links in fact take place, one of the most obvious is the table of content. Basically, this is per se sort of the most natural place where you have a link or indication that points to a particular site. So here you see solid sites that in fact start on this grid and disappear in the spine until they hit the site they are pointing to. And in this case, these are sort of sub-chapters, and some come from the top, the other one on the right comes from the right. So it's also actually something that's totally unknown. Until the very, very end, we really did not know how the design of the book is going to look like. So this is, in fact, what you're challenged with. Here you can see another example where the author, in fact, points to a specific location. There are projects that have been highlighted by the author because the Kooning Foundation was suggesting to other applicants that these are sort of sample cases that they consider to be very valuable. So within the text, and then you also see it on the left side a bit, there were every now and then blue strings and references to other pages. Okay, coming then to the other ones, which is the bidirectional. So indeed, you have the monodirectional, which only points for one side, but if the other side also points back, then you have two directional links. And these have more sort of a stellar, a network structure, whereas like the other ones have stellar forms. You can see that if somebody's actually always pointing to somebody else, you just radiate, you sort of broadcast from your direction. But if other people actually point back to you, then a network, sort of interconnectedness, that's what you get then. So this is important to know how these work. But by defining synonyms, by saying, okay, what are the important words of these book? In this case, for example, excellence, experience, and expertise. So these kind of groups of words are connected, and then you have like determined beforehand what are the sort of word clouds that are important to be connected. If you're interested in one topic, then you are potentially also interested to, if you're talking about internalization, then you're also potentially interested in mobility. So this kind of thought was behind it. So also anticipation of the user experience. Yeah. So what could the user, in fact, consider interesting, to be interesting? These are rendered by software again, and they are displayed here as a dashed line because there have been so many detected that it was far too much to really show them also as solid lines. So the editorials are the solid ones, and the ones that have dashed lines are the ones that only refer to the clouds, to the networking concept. You see here that at the very end of each page, so on the margin, you have also the page it's pointing to, so you could really also, it's not only sort of a visual statement that you're actually generating here, but it could also be a useful tool that you could, if you really like interested into it. To make it a bit more useful, at least, we introduced something that we call the Google snippets. Probably familiar to you is like these 3-4 lines that you have when you Google a term, and you have a sort of preview of what this site where you're pointing to is going to deliver. And we introduced it as a sort of blue column with these sort of sample projects that were important to highlight within this publication. So what you see is that the preview of this one particular hyperlink where it's pointing to. So it's actually these lines are following into the text and showing, okay, well, if you follow this hyperlink, then you will get out here. And these particular highlighted ones at the very end on the list view, this is where they actually come out as sort of blue highlighted. So that's a little detail that what's important for the commissioner to include is that you could also have the list view as a sort of non-linear, linear view mode that you could be interested in to read. So in fact, what is I think very nice is that you have both ways of navigating through it, and you can whether decide you just use it in a conventional mode, or you can read it just by browsing, sort of like a cow, as I've learned. Something that was challenging and also very nice, because once you sort of set up this sort of gameplay with a sort of virtual environment that is interconnected, basically sort of a cloud with words, where actually sort of in this paper there's like a frozen word cloud. That's how I sort of thought about it. The problem is what happens if you have a word on one side of the page and it points to something that's on the back side. And that was interesting because we introduced something that will be called the punch holes. So in fact, you really just go through the page and it will continue its journey. It's actually very nice because then you really sort of start to really think of exactly these problems. Again, to say really this is, was actually programmed, and what was the challenge here in the production was that we could not in fact generate a PDF that could have been easily produced within the production process, but we really had to generate first an old-fashioned PostScript file, then render it back to PDF. And so by actually going back in history, we sort of managed to go ahead. So this is what I think Back to the Future is all about. The next project that's actually a bit this non-linear reading was sort of fascinating to me. Is the same concept that you can sort of start browsing through a book, but it's applied to some to imagery, in fact. So what happened is that we were, I was invited to join a trip of the Refilled Academy to Iran, and I think it happened in 2005, as far as I remember. And what we did, and my fellow 40 other students that joined us, we just went wild with taking pictures of this country. Since it's also a country that, in fact, it's little, is not visited, is not really in the picture. So actually, this whole aspect of visualizing what we want to encounter is also something that, sort of generated the idea of publishing a book about it, especially in times where Iran is suggested to be like a part of the axis of the evil. In times of digital mass production, everybody comes with, I don't know, a hard disk or DVD and tells you, okay, well, these are my sort of 500 images, and you just sort them out yourself because I don't want to do the effort. That's actually how digital photography works nowadays. So I literally got a box full of DVDs, and I was supposed to sort of structure it. The only thing that I could come up with is just print everything out in thumbnails and just start like dropping on the floor. And with my intern, my assistant back then, we tried to sort of come up with ways of grouping them. So this is actually how our floor looked like back then. And we started to find matches. So according to themes, we started to generate sort of tags. And what happens is that once you start this idea of tagging, there's also inherent, there's also a cloud that connects different images. So how it works is, for example, a photo of a woman in a chador, is that likely to be something that is connected to religion, or is that something that's more likely to be connected to society? So once you really have this overlap, you have also the bridge between these different tags. And this is exactly what's displayed. So connecting these topics is in fact something that happens via this imagery. So having produced this virtually, like in a computer, this sort of cloud that has all these connections, we thought, well, in the end, the only thing that we have to do is actually use one particular path and take it out and just print it and, in fact, put it on a linear order. And this is how it sort of happened. And so this whole visualization is just based on one path throughout the whole book. So you can see also this cloud works here also more as a sort of table of content. It has these references. And again, on the pages themselves, it also has the related images. So it is literally sort of frozen into paper, all these sort of hyperlinks that we developed. And as a result, the result of this is actually this, where sort of surprising, sometimes maybe over the top, sometimes very literal, sometimes very, very, obvious combinations come together. And that's actually something that I really consider to be really a quality of unforeseen design developments, where you really think, okay, well, how is it possible that these sort of combinations can come up? This is a bit sort of give you an idea. This concept of hyperlinking did not only work on textual basis, but also on image base. And it was actually very nice to have this experience that, also tagging now works. I mean, nowadays in Instagram, this kind of programs, probably even more sophisticated, is indeed the value of bringing together different types of imagery. So yeah, you get also a sort of a dialogue of images. I think that's also very interesting. Yeah, just for some reasons that you only probably in the second side see. Sometimes it's very obvious what could be the fact that connected them, and these sort of combinations are actually have resulted in very surprising combinations. It was then also nicely displayed in Amsterdam in the bookshops, where we also used the tags as a sort of decoration. But to bring it further even, because this whole idea of hyperlinking, sort of, I think maybe I became sort of a maniac in that, sort of like the fascination of how can I push it even further. There is a publication that's called Hyperbody. I'll pass it around now. It's actually quite a heavy brick with 400 or so pages, and 480 I think. It's displaying the work and the research, collecting actually the research of the Hyperbody department at Delft University, and they've done a lot of research throughout their years on interactive environments, on really like interactive architecture, and this was supposed to then be their physical manifestation. I have to admit that for me it was very clear from the very beginning that if it's about the hyperbody, then we also have to make use of the fact that the book as such is a body and has its dimensions. So on the other hand, the whole idea of networking, connecting pieces, you can see here there are three major pieces. I think like one of them was the research, the other one was the papers, and the other one was the prototypes that have been developed. And there come back, and what I have used here as a sort of chapter title, it's actually the whole book from the top to the bottom, and you can see the clusters are in fact the chapters which are grouped. So on the left you see the blue hyperlinks are hyperlinks only within a chapter, so which I would call internal hyperlinks. And what becomes very interesting is actually if different authors contribute. So you have the external hyperlinks which are displayed on the right. So because the thoughts of different authors, if they're actually sort of if you can connect them, continue and enhance the topic, that was something that I considered to be really like an interesting reading experience, and as a sort of add-on to what you could see as the sort of classic average reading experience. So if you zoom in, you can also see that this actually functions as a table of contents. This one particular blue is then highlighted, and you see how the references sometimes go to only a couple of pages, like you see small arcs, or you see even the bigger arcs that actually refer from the very beginning of a book to the very end. And what we developed was actually a software that would not look at the words themselves anymore, because we had this done, and we had sort of like the blue book, the annual report from the Monia Foundation. We thought, okay, well, synonyms, what's now the very interesting thing about connecting two words that are the same, that doesn't really like add so much value to it. We were interested in, okay, what is the actual meaning of an object, of a word, and how to extract that. And what we developed is a software that would present the hyperlinks on a display. It was displayed like this on the page, but based on the context, and to show how it works, you see this one particular word design, that we actually looked up where is this word actually embedded in. We're not interested in the meaning of the word design itself. In a book that's actually presenting architecture and design, the word design does not really mean anything, because it's repeated so many times that it's you're barely able to grasp it. So we were actually interested in what is the context of these words. So what you get is that you have different hierarchies of words. Yeah, you also see this is one same sentence, but you can also consider the paragraph to be an entity where words are extracted from. So by doing this, you in fact add words more and more in circular form to one single word. And once you sort of stop looking at the actual meaning of this one particular word, you only analyze what is surrounding it. And this was sort of the very, very, very new way of approaching it, because we thought, okay, well, words like, I don't know, design, all of a sudden connect to interaction. This is actually what's happening here, since you see this blue line pointing to what was a snippet to another page and called interaction. This is just a brief way to show how we work when we do this sort of research. But this idea was carried further in the last project I want to show, actually into a digital, because that was sort of like then very obvious. Now we have to develop so many ways of interactive reading in form of a book that we thought, okay, well, why don't we just actually implement it in some tablet? Okay, keywords. So basically, we knew from every single word the surroundings. Yeah? So from every word on a single page, we knew what is the context, and then we sort of determined by comparing all these contexts which are relevant. Yeah. So which have the most value. And that really goes into really sort of like the details of software. Probably if somebody's interested, I can explain it, but it's really sort of just ranging and trying to say, okay, well, this potentially can deliver the most and the highest value. I mean, it's like actually Google works, right? Like sort of determining an algorithm that in fact delivers the best results. You try to sort of get close to it, and in this case, it's actually a combination of multiple keywords. Okay. Well, it works less good with imagery, but okay, there are some hyperlinks here which are displayed in sort of miniature. We thought, okay, in the end, we have done it for this heartbeat RAM publication, so we should also implement it for the imagery. But for me, the most exciting thing was actually sort of to have this context approach to the whole idea of connecting content. So the last project I want to show here is this project that's called Gendersoft Happenings, where within this sort of trajectory, we decided, okay, we're going to do the tablet. And the tablet, this is the new environment where we start reading, and the new form of reading. And there are a couple of things that have been annoying me so long. It really relates back to this template culture, where all of a sudden the software developers present me like you have to have a sort of page that bends, that turns, in fact, to indicate that you're reading a book on a tablet, which I consider to be ridiculous, because in fact this is nothing about illustrating how the old works, but rather inventing the new one. So gesture-based designs. We found a way of displaying content by actually giving space to the reading, the content as such. Then you have the navigation throughout the whole book. So what you have on the bottom is in fact a sort of you really see like the connections. Actually, it's the same design. In fact, we had also a hyperbolic. You had sort of blocks, the entities, which is actually, I think here are the paragraphs, but also the other way around. These are the chapters and these are the paragraphs. So once you actually use these interactively, you can easily switch from one to the other. And you had what is then the new feature, sort of snippets that are also in fact the buttons to jump from one part of the text to the other. So this is the right column that you see marked right here. Having this whole research done, we encountered something very interesting, which was that we could actually group these kind of hyperlinks. And that's also why the whole project is called Gendersoft Happenings. In fact, we could see that there are different types. Yeah? So one type of hyperlinks refers to the same topic. I will explain that in 2 slides. The other one that we called content enhancing, which are hyperlinks that sort of point to a related thought. And then the last group, which we called content surpassing hyperlinks, which in fact totally shifts the meaning and is mostly something that could be seen as a sort of metaphorical. It's also a bit of a bucket when it did not fit to the very first categories. Then we mainly try to find here a place. So what this whole publication, it's by the way The Loss of Simplicity by John Maeda. It was given by a museum that I was asked to contribute for the exhibition, that we should use the work of John Maeda as a reference. This is actually sort of how the content in the end was happening, by using this concept of only looking at the context of words, not consider the actual meaning of it. It was displaced in form of lines, so this is a nice zoom where you can see how it was displayed. I will also show it interactively, so it works on a tablet. And but to give you an idea of what are mirroring hyperlinks that refer to the same topic, I picked out a couple of examples. So a sentence, for example, that says and states, within the same experience, finding the right balance between simplicity and complexity is difficult, was actually linked to a sentence, everyone's instinct is different, and thus a single answer is not readily available to achieve the optimal balance between simplicity and complexity. So, both sentences, in this case by the same author, in the case of hyperbole actually by different authors, connect the words experience and single, which we in the first instance would think, well, what do they have in common? But the context is interesting, and the context is actually that determines this connection, because the context is about the balance between simplicity and complexity, right? So here the match was the idea of how to create the balance between both. Enhancing hyperlinks, which is the second group, which would present a related thought. Here's the example for it. Organization makes a system of many appear fewer, which link to more appears like less, but simply moving it far, far away. Help me again. Organization, so it's the perception of quantity by the means of organization. The same result is achieved by moving it far, far away, not organizing it, but actually creating more distance. So this was indeed, it has some relation, but it's extended or sort of enhanced into a more abstract level. And that's actually where I was most excited about, to find these group of hyperlinks, because this is actually something that is really new and an add-on to what the current reading, or the sort of the old-fashioned way of reading is. Then the third group, the pool of probably a bit more undetermined hyperlinks, was the surpassing hyperlink, shifting meaning into a new context. Example for this is, for example, the sentence, in the beginning of life we strive for independence, and at the end of life it is the same. This is what linked to the realization that life is about waiting comes later in life. So again, it's about life and how to perceive life. So one is actually the time, the end together of life, actually by saying, okay, well, independence is a concept in the very beginning and the very end of life. And this is more about life as a concept of waiting. So things that don't have anything to do, actually, by definition, are not the same, but yeah, have some related idea behind it. So this is how we try to categorize them. And we also introduce something that you would be able yeah, to filter accordingly. So the whole idea, the whole yeah, software was on display in Breda at the Museum of the Image. And yeah, this is what it looked like. So that's for me about stopping using templates. Thank you very much.